Okay, great, guys. Well, welcome to the June 2018 Manufacturing Virtual Marketo User Group. Today we're going to be talking about workspaces and partitions. My name is Michael Tucker. I'm with the Conversion Store, and I am your marketing user group, Marketo user group leader. Today we're going to be welcoming Dale Knudsen from Centric Consulting, and he's a marketing automation leader there, and is going to be able to talk us through this topic. And one of the first things I want to be able to say too is that this is a user group, so we'd like to be able to just keep this an open and interactive sort of session. So all of your microphones are unmuted, and you're more than welcome to be able to chime in wherever you want to. And we want this to be as interactive as discussion as possible. And it's not something that's led from the top down. It's something that is driven, from both directions. So if you have areas and discussions that you want to be able to ask about, or topics that you want to be able to dive into, feel free to ask those, and we'll do our best to get into them as a group. And if there's areas that we can't get into, then all the better. That means that we have a good venue inside of Marketo Nation to be able to go back and start a nice discussion thread from some of those topics. And some of the learnings that we had in our last session on engagement programs really came from questions that we weren't able to answer in the session. So nothing's off limits, and we are going to record this so that everybody else inside of the Marketo Nation community has the ability to be able to watch it as well too, and chime in. And each of us may not have a piece of the puzzle, but collectively across the entire community, we're definitely going to have an answer. So let me start off by talking a little bit just in terms of introductions for the user group and some kind of housekeeping rules. We'll talk about, I'm going to switch these two around, and we'll talk about news and upcoming events first. We'll do a roll call just to get a sense of everybody who's on the line, and what your backgrounds are with workspaces and partitions, and just to learn a little bit about you. And then I can talk a little bit about the next meeting, which we have tentatively set up for June 21st at 12 p.m. And this should make a nice session for us. So the first thing I want to do is, before we kind of preface everything, is to talk about the values within the group. So this is a little bit different from a webinar. It's a little bit different from like a product presentation. This is really an extension of the community. So if you're in a bigger city and you've gone to a Marketo user group session with the wine and cheese plates and sort of a seminar environment where you get to meet your colleagues and kind of engage with people, this is sort of an extension of that. So as a part of that, we want to make sure that this is a safe place to learn. So really important, this is a learning environment, and a part of the learning environment is admitting that you don't know something. So there are things about Marketo that I don't know, and I've been using it for a couple of years now, and I think that each of you can say the same thing too. And so that's really a requirement in terms of learning. So feel free to ask anything, and don't be ashamed or embarrassed if there's something that you don't know that you think you should. Odds are there's a lot of other people that are in the room that don't know it as well too. So that's important. The other thing is it's a collaborative environment. So, we want to make it interactive. It's not a sales environment. There are plenty of places for that, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But for our purposes here today, we just really, want to remove the sales element of it and make want you to be open and feel free to be able to share without having any pressure or anything like that. It should be fun. I have a lot of fun doing this. This is not just a passion and a profession and a hobby. It's also something that I really enjoy doing. And, I've been fortunate to work a lot of other different careers. And I think this is the most fulfilling one in a lot of different ways, intellectually, and then also with the people that you meet too. And if any of you were at Marketo Summit, you probably saw that as well too. I mean, we're a fun group of people in general and across the Marketo community. And then the last thing is professional value-added activities. So all fun aside, we are here to learn. And, at the end of the day, the time that we invest in this is also for our own edification, but, it's also for being able to actually apply some of these skills into our jobs and into our engagements, and into our clients, whether those be third parties or whether that, we're in-house and working with our bosses, or whether we're tertiary stakeholders in a Marketo implementation and, haven't used the application at all. There's still something that we want to be able to learn, and we want you to be able to walk away from this session saying, oh, I got something that I didn't have going into it. So that's always really important too. So I'll dive into the news events really quickly. So it's just a couple of things post-summit that the good folks at Marketo have shared with me. And I don't work for Marketo, by the way, so should just say that this is third-party information to me. And if there are questions about it, for sure post it up inside of the community or your Marketo rep, and they can answer that a lot better than I can. But I can relay information to and help if there's questions there. So lots of information in terms of the newsroom. Probably the big one was the Marketo acquisition of Visible was a big piece that I saw, but all these points from the UX to Sales Engage, really exciting stuff that happened at Summit. And Summit next year is going to be a little bit later in the year. So it's October. It's in Vegas. So it's switched back and forth between Vegas and San Francisco. And next year it's going to be October 21st to 24th. And so I think they haven't opened up the ticket sales yet, but they're coming up. And I've also have a link down here that has just all of the video pre-recordings. So I'll share this with you afterwards inside of the Marketo user group. And if you're not a member of the Marketo user group, please join. We'd love to be able to have you as a part of that. And it helps us to be able to spread word of mouth for the next event that we have. And if you could share that with your friends or your colleagues who are in Marketo, that would help us to be able to grow and kind of get the message out and fuel, great presenters like Dale to be able to come in here and share some of their knowledge and insights with you. The Visible acquisition, that was a big piece. The only thing I really want to mention about this is I saw this offer the other day, and hopefully some of you saw it as well too, but apparently if you do a demo of Visible, they're going to give away, you get 2 tickets to Marketo Summit for doing that, which is $4,000 worth of tickets. So that's pretty great. And what I like about Visible is, the attribution information that comes from it is really relevant, irrespective of what vertical or client that you're working with. So I think there's a lot of value to both of that. So I thought that was a tip. And
it's got to be with a stakeholder, though.
It's got to be with a stakeholder.
Yeah, there's certain conditions that apply to that offer. So it's not like you just launch the demo and they give you tickets.
Right, and it wasn't just a stakeholder. I think it was like a key decision maker or something.
Yes, there it is. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got the link in there. Follow the link. don't go by me.
And what if like the decision is no? Specify.
I don't know.
Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I'll have small type in here next time. Okay, and then so there's upcoming webinars that are coming up. This is one that was shared with us as user group leaders. So that's in, I guess, a week. So that looks pretty interesting actually when you look at all the different topics that are there. But leave it to you guys to kind of review that and judge accordingly about attendance on it. So the next thing I want to do is really going to go through just a quick roll call, not to put anybody on the spot, but it's an interactive session, so we want to be able to let everybody step out and step in front of the room for a second and really just kind of share a little bit about yourselves, just so that we understand the audience and you understand each other. And my hope at the bottom here, on Zoom, we have the ability to set up private breakout rooms. So we'll see how large the room gets as the day ends. And if more people are joining and you find that there are people that are here that you really want to be able to connect with, maybe they shared something that you might want to be able to use in your instance, let me know, and then I can just set up a private breakout room. You'll have the privacy and you'll be able to actually share screen. So it's kind of a neat feature that way. So let's start. Roshan, can I pick on you first just because I'm pulling up all the recipients and I happen to know you're here?
Sure.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Roshan Lakdawala. I'm the director of marketing at this cool company called ATW. A lot of people may not know who that is or what we do, but in short, we sell lots and lots of trailers all throughout the United States. How long have I used Marketo? I want to say about 5 years. Used it for all kinds of purposes. In my current job, it's the first time I'm using it in a B2C implementation as well as a B2B implementation. And we do use Workspaces, and currently we have 4 set up, and Michael and I know each other very well because we've been trying to do this for about the past 5 months now. So yeah, we've got 4 Workspaces set up with more to come.
Great, thank you. Suzanne, can you go next?
Sure. Suzanne Kushner. I'm a digital marketing consultant for Accenture. I'm based in the San Francisco office. I've been using Marketo for 8 years. And I am not currently using Workspaces or Partitions. However, I am in the process of configuring one of our corporate internal sandboxes and with Workspaces and Partitions. And so I'm really appreciate your doing the session today so I can learn more about what I could be and should be doing and what I thought I know was not a good idea and all that stuff. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I'll go quickly. My name is Michael Tucker. I'm a marketing technology consultant. I'm a freelancer. I work for my company is called The Conversion Store. Coming up on 3 years using Marketo. And I've worked in a number of other different technologies previous to that, and CRM and what have you. I am using Workspaces and Partitions. I've used it in a couple of different clients. Very interesting to see it. It's definitely have value. It's very powerful from a feature, and in some cases, it's also very misunderstood too. So, part of my picking the topic on this was really just based off of just questions and learnings that have come from different engagements over the year. And so really excited that Dale was kind enough to be able to agree to present to this, just because I know him to have experience in this area too. So really grateful for kind of opening up the topic and letting us look under the hood and kind of get a sense to see some of the knowledge that he has around this area. So Dale, I'll let you do an introduction, and then I have a session for you, and then we'll kind of turn it over to you to begin your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. So my name is Dale Knudsen. I work for Centric Consulting. We are based out of Ohio, but I work in the Seattle office. And I've been in Marketo now for about 5 years. And it's about, actually, I think it's 4. I don't want to overstate. But I've worked with multiple clients and kind of big clients. One of my first kind of on my own outside of consulting, I worked with a company for a while called Fluke Networks, which is a division of Fluke Corporation, which makes multimeters. So it's a really neat company, and I was able to do work in their Marketo instance and ran a lot of elements of that instance. And then I've done work with others, and so I currently have clients that use Workspaces and Partitions, and actually most of my work that I've done with them are getting clients off of Workspaces and Partitions. So I set up Workspaces, but usually especially when it comes to partitions, it's like I've seen how to undo it. So I think that's where when you have to walk back Workspaces and Partitions, then you really kind of see how the thinking was when they started, and then how that kind of creates these inefficiencies and problems down the line. So yeah, that's definitely that's kind of where I look at it. And then so I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, or you have another slide, Michael?
Yeah. So really just want to kind of introduce you and kind of hand it over to you. And so, this is kind of a good way to transition. So we'll turn off the screen share and hand it over to you in a second here. But just to kind of give everybody some background here. So Dale is our presenter for the day, and he's worked with large enterprise instances of Marketo, and he's worked with multiple lines of business and complex divisions of work. And he's worked in companies in manufacturing, but also in technology and in healthcare as well too. So his area of focus is really in marketing automation and in terms of orchestrating migrations and retrofits and data centralization within the platform. to undertake organizational change and platform adoption. So Dale, I want to hand it over to you again. Thank you for doing this. And if we can kind of give a virtual round of applause, if you will, to Dale and hand it over.
Yay, thanks, bud.
Okay, so let me turn this off and screen share off. And then I think Dale, you can start your screen share and we're good to go.
Great. So being this is a user group, I want, and we're in the spirit of collaboration, I'm going to present this as innovative, but it's not. It's actually due to the Windows 10 update. But my presentation is this. And what I wanted to do is just talk through some of the use cases. And I've got like some other notes, and I was thinking about what I could share with you guys. But at approximately noon, Windows 10 update nuked my machine. So I really wanted to talk about, though, the different examples, three specific examples in regards to workspace and partitions, and then get a collaborative document going, and then at the end be able to send it to you send my presentation once I get it back with some of the things that we kind of come up with, and some as like a user group, some of the questions that we're still trying to tackle. So it's not your traditional slide deck, but that'll come later. I'll get that to you. But so to start, it sounds like, does everybody here know what, I don't think I have to start at like the very beginning, right? We know what a workspace is and we know what a partition is.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, everybody seems like they're on that level, that at least we know what those generally are, right? And as far as so workspaces being those areas in which you kind of, from a user perspective, create different areas of the instance to be able to work under, and then partitions being like the separate databases in Marketo, where you actually have kind of almost like a separate database within the larger one, where they have to flow between. And I think when it comes to this is as I think if you watched that crew chat, I remember watching that a year ago, when they said this is like a big, what do they say? It's like a big boy question. It's a big undertaking, and that you really have to. The first thing I think you have to do with Workspaces is address the why. Why do you need it? And can the system solve through like existing capabilities, like segmentation, or data management programs? Like, is this something that we very much need, or are we just creating? Are we just doing it because we can, and we want to kind of reflect the way the organization is in this platform? So I think that's always the first thing that I notice, is that a lot of people, when they get their Marketo instance, they start slicing and dicing, right? They create segmentations, they create lots of, they want to like replicate the business in Marketo. And so really with that replication comes these kind of inefficiencies. Because you're not necessarily speaking directly to what needs to be done, or the business, the marketing goals and objectives. So that's where you really want to create goals around, if you're going to undertake it or do that. What are the goals of having workspaces and partitions? So I guess that's the question of the group. As you go about that, what types of goals do you try to set for your workspaces and partitions?
Well, I can speak a little bit to, some of my experience with it. I know in some cases it's been because your business units have disparate needs. So they, and probably to get more specific, that there's different stakeholders that are working within different business units who don't necessarily need to have access to the entire instance, but do need to have access to one design studio within one business unit, and not have access to marketing activities or the database across all of the other business units. So that's been one that jumps out right away, as workspaces are really great for being able to kind of do that and get a little bit more of a granular level of identification within some of the role permissions. That's one that I can think of off the top of my head, and I'm sure everybody else has other stuff too.
Yeah, like roles, and for example, roles is the best workspaces being role defined. It can grant you that, and say if you're working in big multi locales or different areas of business and having different lines of work, sometimes that visibility can be really helpful. But as far as like a goal in itself, like creating greater access and visibility, or enabling greater access and enabling visibility-based rules might be like a good goal to set. The interesting thing for me is like when it comes down to like, is it when it comes to partitions, is what are the goals? Why would you partition your database? And that's I still don't have an answer for it. And for me, honestly, is like, I don't think partitions are a good use of companies' time if there's other solutions that can solve better. Have you guys ever seen like a successful good partition in an instance? Partition being defined as like a lead database that's completely contained, right?
So I can talk a little bit, and not to take away the conversation from everybody else, but I met a couple of people actually at Summit that had some really interesting questions around their workspaces and partitions, and what I saw them do is they were able to successfully partition based on geography. So whether your leads are in EMEA or in APAC, and sort of have them set up that way, just strictly by geography. I think the thing on the partition side of things, which, when we were doing our due diligence on deciding how many, if we wanted any partitions in the business, was that you can't have duplicate leads across two different partitions from what I understand. That was a big drawback or limitation, I guess, on that. Just that enforcing that rule across the board is something that really makes you pause and kind of determine, okay, do we really want to use partitions because of that alone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and partitions just they create maybe with like GDPR, this was mentioned a little earlier, right? That's the only case that I can kind of come up with, even when I work. I mean, I'm sure there's a great usable work case out there, but if like the data has to be contained, like for PII, for personal identifiable information, in one area, and like neither they can never meet, right? Then I think that could be a useful instance of putting partitions into play. But as I mentioned before, what I've dealt with is like the unraveling of all this. So I think that's why this question of addressing the why and creating goals around different what you want to achieve. Make sure that you communicate this, because this is like no small feat, no small undertaking. If that makes sense.
So Dale, what are those conversations like then generally? So do you usually kind of call in the senior leadership of whomever your client is and kind of say we're going to do one like face-to-face session with a whiteboard, or do you usually give them a series of questions to kind of mull over before kind of coming back with some recommendations on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like making sure it lands, the first thing that we would do is actually we'd start with reporting as a means of like how, and this is like another big wormhole. But when you look at your reporting and how do you want to visualize your marketing and how do you want to see your marketing? Usually that then will answer the question, like, how do they segment their database? And then, so that segment conversation, if they want an even deeper level past just standard segmentation, and usually that's where Workspaces or specifically partitions comes in, is there's kind of real concerns there. So I guess ultimately, yeah, we'll bring in the various stakeholders and ask the question first as a starting point. What's the reporting? How are you reporting on your instance activity? And then from there, look at the numbers and look at the data and say, and then express where are the pain points in this all-up reports that you're seeing. Is it an operational one, or is it like a performance issue? If it's operational, that's where we kind of move it towards the workspaces and partitions type conversation. Sorry, does that make sense? Is that like a clear place? Would you? I mean, how would you guys, I guess, approach that or try to land that with your the various people you work with?
So I actually have a question, a clarification question. Can you? So when you do reporting, can you only report within a particular workspace? So if you want to do, reporting on a variety of programs that reside in different workspaces, you cannot do that, correct? And I think you were also saying the operational programs, which I assume would reside outside of the workspaces, or is there one master operational program for the entire instance?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm now actually asking two questions.
Yeah, for sure. And this sort of help with every time I'm saying something, I'm like, oh, I wish I had my presentation. But here is where I'd say, let's start, let's dive in there from the workspaces perspective, is like, what are the different types of workspaces that you can have? And for the data so when you start with reporting, you ask, where is this data coming from, and how is the instance structured overall? And that's the architecture of the instance. And then I would really look at the types of workspaces that can be implemented. So if there's a data management workspace, for example, that all leads flow through initially before they go out to be, before they go into the other kind of segments, that's where the reporting can this is where reporting comes into play. Because you can build out a single workspace just for reporting.
A dedicated workspace. I've never seen that. That's very interesting. How you have that partitioned out. Well, partitioned out is the wrong word, but yeah, I haven't seen that where you have the data management workspace.
Yeah, because all leads can flow through kind of that one workspace, and what that actually gives you is an admin area for your workspace. If there's like a lot of people that are working in the instance, then using workspaces to create a spot that people can just be in, that just admins, gives you a lot of control over your data and how it flows in and out of the system.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I really, that's awesome that you've done that before.
Yeah, definitely. And what it gives you that centralized location. So I think that's where this kind of the outputs, I guess, largely when this conversation's had, what ends up happening around workspaces and partitions is many times people forget the marketing, right? And they think about it in terms of operationally, we need to operate in a certain way, or we need to kind of create the structure of the organization. But really, you want to always be considering what is the goal here because we're experiencing pain operationally, or is the goal here because we really want to increase our marketing numbers? And if
right.
you build, because you're trying to architect a system that has really good usability, and this is where I'm a big advocate of workspaces. But when it comes to partitions, less so much, because that limits the data's ability to flow between areas.
I don't know that anybody, actually I'm curious if anybody has exposure working with Marketo in the financial services industry. And I get that it's a manufacturing user group, but thinking in terms of partitions, I can imagine that probably some of the legislation around having a Chinese wall against your data for one part of a finance company versus another might be a good use case for a partition. If you want to make sure that the buying information versus the trading information from different clients, that I think that might. I don't really have a lot of experience with that particular industry, but could see that as an area for being able to kind of use a partition to be able to establish a firm wall between your data from both different sources.
Yeah, definitely. We just did a COE implementation for a bank, actually, and it was like a center of excellence. We were basically coming in and just talking strategy and how to really go at Marketo. We weren't even doing kind of implementation at that point. But workspaces and partitions were really big for them. And also folder level permissions were something that they had to implement. I don't know if have you heard of those?
You mean
I have not.
Yeah, folder level permissions are really neat. You really have to work your Marketo rep and work Marketo it obviously depends on the client and the situation. But if you start that conversation and keep talking about it, they can enable that for your instance.
That's interesting.
And
So
what is that called? Folder permissions?
Yeah, folder level permissions is kind of how the name, and like what that is you have your roles in Marketo they can actually grant by role to specific folders. Because this is where the client that I was working with got very complex. Was the workspaces they had, that level of control wasn't enough for them. They needed even greater. So
I heard a rumor during Summit that part of the UX design is that folder level permissions is going to be a part of that they have, additional improvements that's on the product roadmap, like over the next year or something like that.
Yeah. Does anyone have Blue Sky yet?
It looked great.
I'd like to meet someone that has it enabled in their instance. I still haven't. It's been promised for about 2 years here, and so
Jess Cow has it. I know that Jessica has it, but yeah. So if you talk to Jessica and really nicely ask her, she might be able to give you a screen share or something.
Yeah, we're still working the rep, right? And I think when in this game too, when it comes to workspaces and partitions, is because it's like overlying system architecture. That's a really good point. It's like you've really got to, if you're going to undertake this, like develop a good relationship with your representative, and know the right things to say with Marketo support, because it can get really complicated really quickly. And so I think that's a really important thing, and they can be really helpful as far as like solutioning, especially if you make a lot of noise.
So one of the things, coming to your center of excellence point from a little earlier on, somebody at Professional Services had once given me a really great tip about being able to set up a workspace for your center of excellence, to be able to kind of make it available to sort of share, like use shared folders, and then sort of passing that through to different workspaces as needed. And I don't know if that's how you normally set up a COE, or if do you use the same workspace that you use for some of the centralized analytical reporting that you're kind of referring to before, or do you? How do you normally do? Where do you put your COE normally inside of your instances, and does that overlap with the sort of reporting across all of the different workspaces too?
Yeah. So as far as COEs go, I just generally think that I think centers of excellence should be more like a mentality for driving adoption, not necessarily like a technical reality. Mm-hmm. So for me, the COE exists in the templates folder. And that's like the main idea, is that you're just getting people to think about programmatic templates and how they build. Mm-hmm. But then it depends though, if you're like workspaces, for example, if they're locale based, you're rarely going to be like onboarding new workspaces. But if they're divided up by your business units, then you're going to have to and you have to onboard or offboard workspaces as a whole. Then I would consider that to be like live in the admin and then clone down to the templates folder.
Okay.
But one of the cool things, we did call one at Center of Excellence, and I will say this is a really cool thing, and let me see if I have, no, I don't have it. I keep trying to reference my computer here. Excuse me. Okay. That if you do in-instance documentation, is a really great way to land some of the stuff. And what that is it's a dummy landing page, or like a fake landing page that is your documentation. So we've been able to, so in that example, we were able to kind of pitch this as there's no external documentation for Marketo. It's all on the platform itself.
So are you saying you have something like a wiki or something like that you're using for documentation for the client? Is that what that is?
No, that's for operational usage. So when it comes to centers of excellence and building out, it's it's a landing page that just says read me, basically, start here. Mm-hmm. For people who have to build and use the instance or report on the instance. So we had we had different guides, and they were all non-live web pages that just you go in and you click edit, and then you can view the documentation.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's a neat idea.
Yeah, even if it's just like there's one page is like a start here, or we included a lot of like internal link. We've also included internal links to people's like OneNotes and things outside of that. But at least gives users like a place to start as they're navigating and using different workspaces. When it comes to partitions, it's even worse because you'll have like different databases, right? It's like almost entirely separate databases. So that documentation got way more intense as far as like how to troubleshoot problems in the instance.
I like that. So you have a little context basically for the users and the different stakeholders so that they know kind of how to approach that.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say look at folder level permissions, and then the other one was segmentation. The other like big note I had here was so instead of partitions, look towards segmentation to solve because it's way more flexible and can actually handle the needs of marketers, whereas partitions are really not going to be able to do that for you.
So basically, instead of having a partition, you would set up a different segmentation, segmentation for each instance of a partition, and then you would build segments within those. How does that typically look like then in terms of being able to kind of replace a partition?
Yeah, is the ability to replace a partition really you're looking towards like how you divide up your database and the different means in which you're doing that, and really a partition is only going to be useful like it's not going to be useful in that regard because people can exist you can exist in multiple segmentations, but really you could be in two partitions, right? And so that's not a very clear answer, I realize, but all to say that segmentation serves the needs of the marketer and the ability to like address and do personas and meet your audience. Partitions only kind of separate you away from your audience, if that makes sense, or separates your organization and divides it up, right? Have you like used partitions? Anyone here? Like
I never have.
Never have. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never done it either. Actually, came pretty close to it, and then had a nice chat with professional services, and really that kind of made a step back from it after that.
Ditto.
Yeah, that's good, and that's exactly my experience. Is everyone when you start explaining it to people, they get real. They're like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right.
It seems like almost it's not a conflict of interest is not the same. Like they're maybe great in theory, but in reality they're very difficult to use. That was the impression I got in the documentation.
Yeah,
and we're using partitions.
Oh, who's that?
I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Brent Shane. I'm with Chevron Lubricants.
Oh, awesome. We're welcome to our freeform user group here.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're great. That's great. In which ways are you using partitions?
Actually, to differentiate regional geographies. So, say North America versus Asia Pacific, or EMEA.
Do you run into like difficulties with like leads duplications between your segment or your partitions?
Not really. I mean, we really don't encounter that too often because the businesses are really so separate. We don't really have. I mean, say on our major websites, we might get some leads, some non-US or non-North American leads, right? But those aren't that substantial. I guess you could say we aren't that effective in generating leads to have that high volume, but that really just hasn't been an issue for us. We don't really do a whole lot of, and there are other folks who, I'm a team of one of 3 Marketo admins, so we really don't encounter that issue too often because we do have companion, websites targeted at those geographies, so we just don't get a whole lot of, a lot of people coming in from, in different partitions where they are intended.
Yeah, is there any difficulty between like moving them? Like, if you do you ever have to move people between partitions?
We do, and so that's kind of I guess a little high risk operation. But there is that issue, and I don't actually do it as often. Actually, my boss does most of that. But there really aren't as many as you may think, at least for us.
Great.
And so what is your purpose for having that? Is it because you don't want to have different groups? You could see each other's leads or what?
Yeah, so it's pretty important that we keep leads in their kind of geographic container, if you will, right?
Got it.
From an operational perspective, you said you're a group of three admins. Is it like not to put you on the spot too much? I'm just curious. Do you have like as far as like operationally, do you have any problems like executing or using, I guess, workspaces in combination with partitions? Do you have any like operate? No, you're not.
No, not at all. So we're no, it's not really been a difficulty for us.
That's good. That's great to hear. When you create like all up reports on by partition, do you report by partition?
Yes, well, kind of yes and no. I mean, reports are kind of all over the place, but it really hasn't been an issue for us. It just really hasn't been an issue. So yeah, I mean, we create a variety of reports, you know, in conjunction with Salesforce, and all this ties into Salesforce, of course. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like the people that I spoke with at Summit that were using it as well. It's Michael, by the way. Nice to meet you, Brent.
Good to meet you.
And you know, the people that I had talked to at Summit at some of the different tables and over breakfast and things like that had kind of said the same thing. You know, when they had them in place, they had done a lot of the due diligence up front to be able to determine that they fit for their organizations. And I guess I don't know if this is true for everybody, and I don't know if this is the process that you went through, but really what I've heard is that, you know, as long as you're really disciplined about the due diligence that you do before coming into them, and you have a good sense of, you know, we understand some of the restrictions around them, that it's okay to be able to manage and work around those if that's the case. So I don't know if that's consistent with your with your experience in terms of implementing them. Were you there when they implemented, or did you?
No, no. Actually, I've been here about 4 years. In the Marketo instance was created about a year before I joined. So you know, I came in when you know, it was all still fairly new on a global scale. And I had not used Marketo before, or really, you know, Eloqua or Marketo, but so I've just kind of learned from the ground up here in the past 4 years about Marketo, but been doing online marketing forever. So, so no, it really hasn't. So it's really kind of the only way I've known it, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we manage, you know, global. I manage mainly work on North America, and my boss and another team member manage, you know, the rest of the globe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I had crossed my plate as you're going through, there's a really great webinar, guys, and I love going through and learning off of the Marketo webinars that are at marketo.com/webinars to kind of like shamelessly plug Marketo's website. But there was a fellow in there, I think it was Mike Madden. I might be wrong with this. I apologize, Mike, if I am. But he had done a presentation on federated Marketo instances, where you actually have like a separate Marketo instance and you webhook leads between them in those cases. And it was, if I remember the webinar correctly, it's been a little while, but the reasoning for doing that is so that you have separate connections for your CRMs. If you have like 4 different business units, and one business unit uses SAP, one uses Salesforce, one uses Dynamics, it might be easier just to buy 3 separate Marketo instances and webhook between them. So I don't know. That's sort of something that's kind of come through as a thought, as a potential alternative. It's expensive, right? But interesting to kind of see some creative ways to be able to address that if you have infrastructure needs across your enterprise, right?
Yeah, that's how Amazon's set up, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had run into something, what I have seen multiple times now at some larger clients has been where they had multiple Marketo instances in-house, and it was really more for political reasons in that, you know, one, or just the company's really large and not, you know, not one CMO who's managing all the divisions or whatever. And so these in particular companies I'm referencing, they had purchased, like one group purchased it and then another group purchased it, and none of them were tied together. And so I had suggested to the client that they really should look at that and potentially merge it into one instance and, you know, purchase Workspaces or something versus having a bunch of disparate instances. So I'd like to maybe even try, if you guys have any thoughts, like what would be the advantage again to having, or necessity to having all those disparate instances? Like, why could that not be handled with Workspaces?
So one of the big things that I saw in the presentation, and you know, knowing this, working with like API connections and launch point connections a lot, and with you know, using Marketo to pass data between third-party applications as well too, is that in some cases it winds up being easier to have different Marketo instances, so that as you have API connections and they're pushing data into or out of Marketo, you know, you don't want to have those interfere with other workspaces and partitions. So if even if you have workspaces and partitions in place, you still have one launch point center in that instance that writes to the database within that instance, as opposed to writes to within one workspace. And I can't speak to partitions as well. Maybe Brent, you have some insight on that, but that's where it becomes easier. So especially from what I saw in the presentation, they were specifically talking about the CRM connector. So, you know, being able to go through the process of doing your Salesforce to Marketo connector is quite the task in one instance. But, you know, imagine doing that and then having to you know, also do an SAP integration with that same instance. You'd have all sorts of different questions that would come up saying, you know, if I sync the data from a Salesforce instance into Marketo, is that same field then going to sync into SAP, and how does that look? I don't work with SAP, but you know, I have worked with people who have worked with it, and my understanding is that there's some middleware that's involved in there. So it can be really, really complicated to do that if you're talking about one instance. And so in those cases, you may just find it easier just to be able to say, you know, let's have an instance of Marketo for your Salesforce users in one business unit, and we'll have a second instance of Marketo for your SAP users in that other business unit, and then just doing the connection between the two Marketo instances would be a lot easier than trying to do that with two different CRMs.
Got it. Well, you know what, now that I think about it, that does make sense in that, obviously if you're, you know, you're making calls back and forth. The system is making calls back and forth in between two huge databases. That could really slow things down and just bog the system down in a way that it's almost unusable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was really excited, and Michael worked with me there in the 1GDC instance of Marketo, which is Microsoft won a Revy for it. They won the big award, and it was one big instance of Marketo. And the tree, the folder tree was basically unusable at some points through the migration, but then also operationally. So for enterprise grade, really one big instance, Marketo's really been tested, and it's like it can't handle that much, just one instance.
Right.
So that's why I think many companies will say, well, and also if you think about spend, like many departments have kind of their own control over their spend, and they can use whatever tools they need to kind of execute their marketing. So that means that that's why they would kind of spin up a new instance. And many times there'll be some sort of like data, kind of a data warehouse, right, that all these instances feed into. And that, even outside of a CRM, right, you'll see that kind of as an intermediary, especially if you have like a Dynamics connection. And then from there, what that data warehousing kind of does in getting actually the data away from Marketo as a pass-through, like you mentioned, using Marketo as a pass-through, you really just kind of, all the data wrangling that you can do, it's much easier to data wrangle in a SQL environment, right? Not in Marketo. So that's why many times they'll like export the actual data from Marketo and put it somewhere else.
One of the things that I found was really interesting at Summit is, you know, I got to attend the Partner Summit luncheon and listen to a little bit about, just a little bit about what they're, you know, doing in terms of Google Cloud and some of the integration there. And, you know, just knowing, you know, how Google Cloud works. And I'm curious to see, I have no information about this whatsoever. So don't take this as any sort of recommendation or anything like that. But, it, you know, it makes me wonder about how that relationship is going to help in terms of scalability for Marketo to be able to tackle some of these larger data enterprise questions that we're talking about here. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me to see in the next year or two, as that's becoming more and more integrated as a part of the platform, that you'll see Marketo be able to kind of scale up to quickly handle things like the one GDC problems that we were talking about there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We'll see how that part. Hopefully, it actually results in things. That's always been my experience with Marketo, right? It's you're promised, and they're great at marketing, or they do marketing, and so you hear about it for a really long time, and then it's like, when is it going to land? Like when are we going to get this? So we'll see how that kind of transitions along. And yeah, I was at the Partner Summit as well. It was really interesting to see kind of all the different providers and everyone that's in this sort of this economy that they're creating, I guess. Well, as far the only other kind of note here I had is that it's person volume, and then person volume, full level permission, segmentation, develop relationship with rep. And then the last one, I think ultimately, as you experience and work with workspaces and partitions, just to kind of wrap it up, is really make sure you're always addressing the why and looking towards goals, and those kind of like marketing goals that you're trying to hit, and don't just try to replicate organizational structures just because you can. I think the danger with these two features is that it's kind of like skeuomorphism, right? Like the iPhone with the paper look to it. Why do it? And make sure that if you do it, you're doing it in a way that that meets the needs of your organization, not just because you can. So that's my presentation, brought to you largely by Windows 10 update crashing my computer. And so I will be spending some time trying to get a presentation back, and hopefully I can share it with the VMUG afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much, Dale, for doing this. And I just did the Windows 10 update as well too, so I'm holding my breath that everything's going to work out okay, but I'm sure will. But you know, I've been there for sure. And you have the slides, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to share the recording. And the slides that I have across the VMUG, and just want to ask everybody in the group: have you all joined the user group actually in Marketo community space? Is there anybody who hasn't? Yeah. So actually, let me see if I can do this, guys, just to make sure that we all have the ability to kind of see this. So I am going to just go nation.marketo.com. And then if you click user groups, and you'll see all the different user groups that exist here. And so within that, I'm just going to do a search and say manufacturing. I think the order is different for each person, or it might be on latest activity. So that's our event. You'll have to log in, obviously, to your using your Marketo login to be able to do that. And then once you do, you'll see kind of an actions button here that allows you to be able to follow and join the group. So, thankfully putting this in the recording. So we'll share this for sure within the user group, and that'll be the place to be able to go get slides, both my slides and then Dale, if you send me your slides, I'll make sure that those are incorporated as well too. And then also other learnings too. So, I'll put a link to the webinar on federated Marketo instances, because I just thought it was a very interesting presentation, and definitely if you're looking at workspaces and partitions within your Marketo instance, it's worth looking at that as well too, just to kind of give you a sense of what's possible across the instances.
That would be fabulous. Thank you.
And then, the other thing is we're trying to actively build the number of speakers. So I have another speaker that I've lined up, and it's just from networking over Summit, but made friends with a great guy named Adam Blinzer, who's the marketing automation manager at Pods. And so tentatively, we've set up everything on Thursday, June 21st, so about a month from now. We're going to do it at 12 noon Eastern time, and just see what kind of the audience is like there. And one of the things that Adam and I got the chance to talk about is he has this very interesting way of building in dynamic content using scripted tokens. So I don't know how many of you have used Velocity and kind of gotten into a lot of people use it just for doing things like building in copyright information and having an automated update to say what the current year, 2017, 2018, 2019. Adam has some really, really interesting things that he's done with tokens that help with dynamic content. So I thought it was really interesting, and I just couldn't help but invite him to be able to share that. So he's been kind enough to be willing to do that next month, and that's going to be our next presentation. So I think that's everything, but definitely want to say thank you to all of you for attending, and also for openly sharing about your experiences too. So that takes courage, and I really appreciate that a lot too. And I think it just helps to make a good learning environment for everybody. And with that, we can call it the end of the meeting there. And if some of you want to be able to do breakout rooms, if you want to let me know, I'll gladly do that. And I'm going to turn off the recording right now just so we can speak freely. And you guys kind of let me know. So give me 1 second. And thank you all for attending.